My name is Olivia Reed. I was 35 years old this summer. My porch became the stage for the most important performance of my life. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in early June, the kind of day where the sunlight filters through the old oak tree in my front yard and makes everything feel a little softer than it really is. I was inside folding laundry when the knock came. 3 firm, confident raps that carried the weight of expectation. I almost didn't answer it. I had learned by then that some doors are better left closed. But something in me, that quiet voice that had grown stronger over the past year, told me to walk over. So I did. When I opened the door, they were all standing there like a carefully arranged photograph. My mother Diane in her pale blue cardigan, the one she always wore when she wanted to look respectable. My father Richard slightly behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the wooden boards of my porch. And beside them, my ex-husband Ryan and his wife Brooke, both dressed like they were attending a business luncheon rather than showing up unannounced at the home of the woman they had abandoned. My mother held a bouquet of expensive white lilies wrapped in crisp cellophane, the same kind of flowers people send when they want to look sorry without actually being sorry. For a long moment, none of us spoke. I just stood there in my simple white t-shirt and jeans, barefoot on my own porch, looking at the people who had once been my family. The same people who had turned their backs when my 8-year-old son, Noah, was fighting for his life in a hospital bed 90 minutes away from home. If you've ever stood face to face with people who failed you at your lowest and watched them try to rewrite history, now that things are different, you already know the strange mix of calm and fire that rises in your chest. I didn't invite them inside. I stepped out onto the porch instead and gently closed the door behind me so my 2 younger children couldn't hear what was about to happen. The boys were playing in the backyard, their laughter floating through the air like a reminder of everything I had fought to protect. My mother's eyes were already glistening with those practiced tears she could summon on command. "Olivia, honey," she began, her voice soft and trembling just right. "We've all been doing a lot of thinking. We want to make things right. We're still family." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because of how perfectly timed this all was. 11 months earlier, I had stood in a different kind of silence, the kind that echoes in hospital hallways at 3 a.m. when you're the only parent left. But I'll get to that. For now, let me take you back so you understand exactly why this moment on my porch mattered so much. My name is Olivia Reed, and for most of my adult life, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and never asked for too much, my family would show up when it truly counted. I was wrong, and that lesson cost me more than I ever thought I could survive. I'm going to tell you the whole story today, the beautiful parts, the devastating parts, and the quiet, powerful parts where I finally learned the difference between being wanted and being useful. If you've ever begged someone who was supposed to love you for help, and they chose convenience instead, I need you to stay with me. Because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when a mother decides that her children will never have to beg again. Type love in the comments if you've ever carried a burden alone that should have been shared. This is the story of how I lost my oldest son, almost lost myself, and then rebuilt a life so complete that the people who abandoned us came crawling back when they saw its value. And how, on that warm Saturday afternoon, I finally closed the door on the version of me who still needed their approval. It all started with a phone call 11 months earlier, a Tuesday night at 8:14 p.m., to be exact. The same time my mother would later choose garden club photos over her dying grandson. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me bring you into my world before the storm hit. My name is Olivia Reed, and for 8 beautiful, ordinary years, I built a small life that felt like everything I had ever wanted. I was a freelance photographer, not the glamorous kind you see on Instagram with big studio lights and celebrity clients, but the real kind. The one who captured first birthdays in backyards, maternity sessions in golden hour, and quiet family moments that people would treasure long after the kids grew up. Every morning started the same gentle way. I'd wake up before the sun, make coffee in my tiny kitchen, and watch Noah, my 8-year-old, sleep for a few extra minutes. He had my dark wavy hair and his father's curious green eyes. From the time he was 4, Noah loved being behind the camera almost as much as I did. He would drag his little stool over, stand on his tiptoes, and ask me to show him how to frame a shot. "Mom, make sure you get the light right," he'd say with all the seriousness of a grown-up artist. Those were the moments that made every late-night edit worth it. We didn't have much money, but we had rhythm. I worked from home most days, so I could be there when he got off the school bus. In the afternoons, we'd go on what we called light walks, wandering around our quiet neighborhood looking for beautiful moments to capture. The way sunlight hit an old wooden fence. A neighbor's cat sleeping in a flower box. Noah learned to notice beauty in ordinary things, and I think that was the greatest gift I ever gave him. Ryan, my ex-husband, had left when Noah was only 3. He said the photographer life was too unstable, that he needed something more serious. 2 years later, he married Brooke, a real estate agent who loved posting about their perfect blended life. I didn't fight him much on custody. I just focused on being the steady one for Noah. My parents lived about 40 minutes away. My mother, Diane, was always the center of attention in our family, the one who hosted holidays and posted perfect family photos. My father, Richard, was quieter, the type who avoided conflict by staying busy in his workshop. I thought that was normal. I thought that was love. If you've ever been the one who held everything together while everyone else watched from a distance, you know how easy it is to convince yourself that you're fine carrying it all. I told myself I was strong, independent, capable. I scheduled client shoots around Noah's school schedule, edited photos late into the night, and still made sure he had homemade lunches and bedtime stories. We had our little traditions: Friday movie nights with popcorn on the couch, Sunday pancakes with ridiculous toppings, and keeping a shared journal where we wrote one good thing that happened each day. I remember one evening, about 6 months before everything changed, Noah and I were sitting on the back porch steps watching fireflies. He leaned his head against my shoulder and said, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to take pictures of the whole world with you." My heart felt so full it almost hurt. In that moment, I believed we had built something unbreakable. But life has a way of testing what we think is unbreakable. The first sign came quietly. Noah started getting tired faster than usual. Bruises appeared on his legs that he couldn't explain. I told myself it was just growing pains and too much playing outside. I took him to the pediatrician for a regular checkup, expecting nothing more than a vitamin recommendation. That Tuesday night at 8:14 p.m., my phone rang while I was editing photos. The doctor's voice was careful, professional, but I heard the weight underneath. They needed us at the children's hospital immediately. Blood work had come back with alarming numbers. They suspected leukemia, and not for the first time. Noah had fought a milder form when he was 5 and beaten it. This time, the doctor said, it looked more aggressive. I hung up the phone with shaking hands. Noah was already asleep in his room, breathing peacefully like any other 8-year-old boy who believed his mom could fix anything. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, watching him, trying to memorize the peace on his face before the storm arrived. That night, I did something I had rarely done in my life. I reached out for help. I called my mother first. "Mom, it's Noah. The leukemia is back. They want him admitted right away. I need help with the younger boys while I stay at the hospital with him." There was a long pause. Then came the questions that weren't really questions. "How long will this take, Olivia? You know your father and I have that big anniversary cruise booked for our 40th. We've been planning it for 2 years." I stood in my dark kitchen gripping the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, he's 8. He's scared. I'm scared." She sighed like I was asking her to move mountains instead of watching her grandchildren for a few weeks. I'll never forget what she said next. "Sweetheart, you chose this life as a single mom. You have to figure out how to make it work." Those words landed like stones in my chest. I didn't argue, I simply said okay and hung up. That was the first crack, but it was far from the last. The next few hours blurred together in that strange way trauma has of slowing down time and speeding it up at the same time. I packed a small bag for Noah with his favorite stuffed dinosaur, the blue blanket he'd had since he was a baby, and the little notebook we used for our one good thing entries. I woke him gently, trying to keep my voice light even though my hands were trembling. "Buddy, we need to go see the doctors again. Your blood isn't feeling very good right now." He looked up at me with those trusting green eyes and simply nodded. At 8 years old, he already understood more than he should have. That's what chronic illness does to kids. It steals their innocence early. The drive to the children's hospital 90 minutes away felt endless. Noah fell asleep in the back seat, and I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, counting his breaths like they were the only thing anchoring me to the earth. When we arrived, the oncology team moved fast. More blood draws, a bone marrow biopsy, and then the words I had been dreading. It's relapsed acute lymphoblastic leukemia. This time it's more aggressive. I sat in that cold consultation room alone while Noah rested in his new hospital bed, and I felt the full weight of being the only adult in the room. No partner, no backup, just me. That's when I made the second call. I dialed my father's number because sometimes I still hoped he might step up. He answered on the third ring, but I could hear my mother in the background. "Dad, Noah's leukemia is back. It's bad. I need someone to help with the little ones, even for a few days, please." There was a muffled conversation. Then my mother took the phone. "Olivia, we love you, but we can't just drop everything. Your father has doctor appointments, and I have garden club responsibilities. This cruise is important to us. We've sacrificed enough raising you." Sacrificed, that word again. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the cool hospital wall. "Mom, he's your grandson. He's asking for you." Her voice sharpened just slightly, that polished tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while being cruel. "You should have thought about stability before choosing this freelance photography life, and having 3 kids on your own. We can't keep rescuing you every time things get hard." I didn't yell. I didn't cry on the phone. I simply whispered, "Okay," and hung up. If you've ever heard the people who brought you into this world tell you that your child's suffering is inconvenient, you know the particular kind of emptiness that settles in your bones. It's not just rejection, it's the death of an idea, the idea that family means showing up even when it's ugly. I walked back into Noah's room and forced a smile. He was watching a cartoon on the small TV, his little hand gripping the dinosaur. "Mom, is Grandma coming?" I brushed his hair back and kissed his forehead. "Not right now, sweetheart. But I'm here. I'm always here." That night, as machines beeped softly around us and nurses moved quietly in the hallway, I sat in the stiff recliner chair and stared at my phone. The family group chat stayed silent. No offers. No, we're on our way. Just blue ticks showing they had read my messages. I learned something important in that moment. Silence can be louder than any scream. But I still had one more name on my list. Ryan, Noah's father. I stepped into the dimly lit hallway and dialed his number. Brooke answered. "Olivia, it's late. What's going on?" I kept my voice steady. "Noah's leukemia relapsed. He's in the hospital. I need help with the boys so I can stay here with him. Even a few afternoons would mean everything." There was a short, sharp laugh on the other end. Not cruel exactly, but dismissive in that way successful people can be when inconvenience enters their perfect world. "Olivia, we're in the middle of launching Ryan's new consulting firm. This isn't a good time. You're the mom. You chose to keep full custody. You need to figure this out." Then Ryan got on the line for 10 seconds. "Look, we'll send some money if you need it. But we can't be there physically right now. Money, not presents, not time, just money." I hung up and slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold floor. In that fluorescent lit hallway, I realized something that would change me forever. Love isn't what people say. Love is what they do when it costs them something. My own parents and my ex-husband had just shown me, in crystal clear terms, that my son's life was not worth their inconvenience. That night, as I held Noah's hand while he slept, I made a quiet promise to myself and to him. I would never beg again. I would carry this alone if I had to. And somehow, someway, I would make sure my children never felt this kind of abandonment. But carrying it alone came with a price I didn't know if I could pay. The weeks that followed tested every limit I thought I had. The hospital became our second home. 90 minutes each way on Route 9, sometimes twice a day when I had to check on my younger boys, Lucas and Ethan. I was surviving on hospital coffee, vending machine snacks, and the kind of willpower only a mother fighting for her child can summon. Noah was brave in the way only children can be. Even as the chemotherapy made his hair fall out in clumps and his small body swell from steroids, he still tried to make me smile. He'd point at the IV pole and call it my robot friend, or ask the nurses to take silly photos with him using my old camera. That camera, the worn Nikon I'd had since before he was born, became our little anchor. He loved flipping through the photos we'd taken on our light walks, remembering better days. One afternoon, after a particularly rough round of treatment, he looked up at me with tired eyes and asked the question I'd been dreading. "Mom, why doesn't Grandma or Grandpa come see me? And why doesn't Dad want to visit?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and chose honesty wrapped in gentleness. "Some people find it hard to show up when things get scary, baby. But I'm here, every single day." He nodded slowly, then whispered, "I wish they loved me enough to be scared with us." That sentence carved itself into my heart. I held him while he cried quietly, his bald head resting against my chest, and I promised myself I would remember every detail of this pain. Not to stay bitter, but to make sure I never passed this kind of conditional love to my children. Meanwhile, my family's silence grew louder on social media. I saw my mother post photos from her garden club luncheons, smiling brightly with captions like, "So blessed to be surrounded by my girls." The timestamp on one post hit me especially hard, posted at 8:14 p.m. on the exact night Noah had spiked a dangerous fever and I was desperately calling her. Listening to the phone ring unanswered, while nurses rushed into the room. My father liked every post but never sent a single message. Ryan and Brooke posted vacation-style stories from their new lake house, complete with captions about building our dream life. They had time for that, but not for their dying son. If you've ever watched the people who should love you hardest choose comfort over compassion, you understand the particular kind of grief that brings. It's not just the absence. It's the active choice to look away. I stopped checking the family group chat. The blue heart they had added years ago now felt like a cruel joke. Instead, I poured everything into Noah. I read him stories until my voice went hoarse. I took photos of his brave smile even when he was in pain. I sold my backup camera lenses, canceled every non-essential subscription, and picked up extra photo editing gigs I could do from his hospital room at 2 a.m. while he slept. The hospital social worker, a kind woman named Elena, noticed how alone I was. She brought me warm meals some nights and never pushed when I said my family was busy. One evening, she sat with me in the quiet hallway and said something that planted a small seed. "Olivia, sometimes the family we're born into isn't the family that saves us. We get to build a new one." I didn't fully believe her then, but I held on to those words like a lifeline. As Noah's condition worsened, the doctors grew more honest. The second relapse was aggressive. The treatments that worked before weren't holding this time. I spent nights researching clinical trials, speaking with specialists, doing everything I could to stretch time. Through it all, I started recording short voice notes on my phone late at night. Not for anyone else, just for me. I spoke about the fear, the love, the betrayal, the small beautiful moments with Noah. Those recordings became my private therapy, my way of not letting the pain swallow me whole. I didn't know it yet, but those quiet voice notes would eventually become the foundation of something much bigger. For now, though, I was still in survival mode, still the only one showing up, still learning, day by painful day, that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. And then came the night when even my strength wasn't enough. Noah's fever spiked again around 2 a.m., the kind of fever that makes the monitors scream and brings an entire team running into the room. I held his small hand while doctors and nurses worked around us, adjusting medications, drawing more blood, whispering urgent words I tried not to fully hear. In that moment, I would have given anything for just one other adult to sit in the waiting room, or watch my younger boys back home. But there was no one. I had already burned through every favor with neighbors. Mrs. Thompson next door had watched Lucas and Ethan for far too many nights already. I paid the teenage sitter from down the street more than I could afford, using money from selling my second camera body. Every dollar was spoken for. Every hour was accounted for. And still it wasn't enough. When the fever finally broke near dawn, I drove home exhausted to check on the boys. Lucas, who was 5, clung to my leg the second I walked through the door. Ethan, only 3, just stared at me with big worried eyes. They missed their big brother. They missed the mom who used to laugh more. I made them pancakes at 6 a.m., read them a short story, then drove back to the hospital. The 90-minute drive had become a lonely ritual I knew by heart. Every exit sign, every gas station, every mile marker. I learned to be 2 mothers at once. At the hospital, I was the calm one who read Noah his favorite adventure books and took photos of his drawings taped to the wall. At home, I was the one trying to keep life normal for his little brothers, packing lunches, pretending everything was going to be okay, answering questions I didn't have answers for. "Mommy, is Noah coming home soon?" Lucas would ask every single night. I would pull him close and say, "We're fighting really hard, baby. Some truths are too heavy for small hearts." Through all of it, my family remained ghosts. My mother posted more photos. A beautiful dinner with friends, a new hairstyle, another garden club event. Each post felt like a quiet knife. My father sent one text that simply read, "Thinking of you," nothing more. Ryan and Brooke sent a small Venmo transfer with the note for medical stuff, no calls, no visits. No questions about how Noah was actually doing. I stopped expecting anything from them. That was the turning point. When you finally accept that the people who should love you most have already decided your crisis isn't their problem, something inside you shifts. The begging stops. The waiting stops. You begin to build a quiet fortress around what's left of your heart. Late at night, while Noah slept under the soft glow of hospital lights, I kept recording those voice notes. I spoke about the fear that lived in my chest like a second heartbeat. I spoke about the guilt of not being able to do more. I spoke about the anger I didn't let myself feel during the day. Those recordings were raw, honest, and sometimes broken by quiet tears. They were never meant for anyone else. They were just my way of staying sane. Elena, the hospital social worker, became my only real support. She would sit with me some nights, bring me real food instead of cafeteria mystery meat, and listen without offering empty platitudes. One night she said gently, "You're carrying the weight of 3 generations right now. Don't forget to breathe, Olivia." I laughed a little through my exhaustion. Breathing feels like a luxury these days. But I kept going, because that's what mothers do. We find strength we didn't know we had when our children need us. I sold more equipment. I picked up rush editing jobs at 3 a.m. I learned which gas station had the cheapest coffee on Route 9. I memorized the exact timing of Noah's medication rounds so I could be there holding his hand. I thought I was preparing for the worst. I thought I was building armor. What I didn't realize was that the worst was still coming, and when it arrived, it would break me in ways I never imagined. But it would also reveal something stronger underneath, a version of myself that no longer needed their permission to survive. If you're watching this right now, and you're in the middle of your own silent battle, carrying everything alone, while the people who should help stay quiet, I see you. I was you. Keep breathing. Keep showing up for your babies. The story isn't over yet. The days blurred into a rhythm of survival that no one should ever have to learn. Mornings were for the younger boys, making sure Lucas and Ethan had breakfast, brushing their teeth, and trying to explain in simple words why Mommy had to leave again. Afternoons and nights belonged to Noah at the hospital. The 90-minute drive became my thinking space, though most of the time my thoughts were too heavy to hold. I kept waiting for a shift. For my mother to suddenly realize her grandson was slipping away. For my father to show up with coffee and quiet strength. For Ryan to remember he had a son who still asked about him. But the shift never came. Instead, their lives continued on as if nothing was happening. I'd scroll through my phone during the quiet hours between Noah's treatments and see it all. My mother at another garden club event, smiling in pastel colors, captioning photos with "grateful for these special moments with my friends." The timestamp on one of them matched the exact hour Noah had a seizure that left the doctors rushing in. She had been posting while I was holding my son down, whispering that everything would be okay, even though I didn't believe it myself. My father remained silent. He liked a few of her posts. That was the extent of his involvement. Ryan and Brooke were even more active. They posted stories from their new backyard barbecue, showing off their blended family weekends. Brooke tagged Ryan in posts about building their dream business together. Not once did they ask for an update on Noah. Not once did they offer to drive up. One evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, I stepped into the family lounge and called my mother again. This time I was direct. "Mom, he's getting worse. The doctors aren't sure how much longer the treatment will buy us. Can you please come, even for one day?" Her response was calm, almost rehearsed. "Olivia, we've talked about this. Your father isn't feeling well, and we have commitments. You need to focus on being positive. Stress isn't good for Noah." Positive, as if my son's life was a mindset issue. I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. I simply said, "I understand," and ended the call. But I didn't understand, not really. How do you understand people who can look at a child suffering and decide it's not their problem? Noah started asking less about them as the weeks went on. I think even at 8 years old, he began to protect his own heart. Instead, he focused on the things he could control, asking me to take photos of his drawings, planning what kind of tree we'd plant when he got home, and telling me stories about all the places we'd visit after this is over. Those conversations hurt the most, because deep down I knew after might not come the way we hoped. Elena continued to be my quiet anchor. She never judged my family's absence. She simply showed up with warm soup, sat beside me, and sometimes held my hand when the weight became too much. One night she told me, "You're building something beautiful, even in this pain, Olivia. Don't let their silence define your worth." Her words stayed with me. Meanwhile, I kept recording my voice notes every night after Noah fell asleep. I spoke about the anger I was learning to carry without letting it consume me. I spoke about the love that felt bigger than any betrayal. I spoke about how I was slowly realizing that family isn't who shares your last name. It's who chooses to stand in the fire with you. The days they chose not to show up taught me the hardest lesson of my life. Some people will only love you when it's convenient for them, when it costs nothing, when it makes them look good. But I was done waiting for convenient love. I was learning to build something real with whatever strength I had left. And then, on a quiet Sunday morning, when the hospital hallway was almost empty, that strength was tested in the cruelest way possible. Noah had been struggling for days. His little body was so tired from fighting. The doctors had gently prepared me that we were reaching the end of what medicine could do. I nodded, took notes, asked questions, but inside I was screaming. How do you prepare to say goodbye to your 8-year-old son still believes you can fix anything? That final night, the hospital felt different. The usual beep seemed softer, the lights dimmer. I climbed into the narrow hospital bed with him, careful of all the tubes and wires, and held him close just like I did when he was a newborn. His head rested on my chest, bald from chemo, but still smelling like the coconut shampoo I used to wash him with. "Mom," he whispered, his voice weak but clear, "are you scared?" I kissed the top of his head and answered honestly, the way we always promised each other we would. "Yes, baby, I'm scared, but I'm more grateful. Grateful for every single day with you." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I'll carry for the rest of my life. "I'm sorry I got sick again. I wanted to take more pictures with you." My heart shattered into pieces so small I didn't think they'd ever fit back together. I told him it wasn't his fault. I told him he was the bravest person I'd ever known. I told him how proud I was to be his mom. We talked about our light walks, the fireflies, the silly selfies, and all the places we dreamed of going. I promised I would keep taking pictures for both of us. Elena stayed past her shift that night. She didn't say much. She just sat nearby, offering silent support, making sure I wasn't completely alone in those sacred final hours. Around 4:17 a.m., Noah's breathing changed. It became slower, gentler, like he was finally letting go. I held him tighter, singing the lullaby I used to sing when he was little. His hand stayed in mine until the very end, and then he was gone. The room went completely still. No more monitors alarming, no more struggling. Just silence and the soft gray light of early morning coming through the blinds. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I just held my son and whispered over and over, "I love you. I love you. I love you." I gave him every single piece of my heart in those last moments. Everything I had. If you've ever held your child as they slipped away, you know there are no words that can touch that kind of pain. It's a grief so deep it rewrites who you are. In that quiet hospital room, with only Elena as witness, I felt something inside me break and rebuild at the same time. I had given my son everything while he was here, every hour, every tear, every sacrifice, and I would never regret a single second. The days after that are still a blur, telling Lucas and Ethan that their big brother wasn't coming home. Watching their little faces try to understand something impossible. Planning a funeral when I could barely stand. But through it all, I kept one promise to myself: I would never beg my family again. They showed up at the funeral, of course. My mother crying the loudest, accepting condolences like she had been there every night. My father standing silently in the back. Ryan and Brooke sent a large expensive wreath but didn't attend. The performance was perfect. The absence during the hard part had been honest. Their presence now felt like salt in an open wound. I stood there holding my younger son's hands and said nothing. Some battles aren't worth fighting at your child's funeral. But something had changed in me on that quiet Sunday morning. The version of Olivia who waited for people to show up was gone. In her place was a mother who had learned exactly who her real family was and who it wasn't. Those late-night voice notes I had recorded became my only comfort in the weeks that followed. I listened to Noah's voice in them. I cried. I wrote more. And slowly, without realizing it, I was turning my pain into something that might one day help someone else feel less alone. The storm had taken my son, but it hadn't taken my voice. The funeral was held on a cloudy Thursday afternoon, the kind of day where the sky itself seemed to be mourning. I chose a small chapel near our neighborhood because Noah loved simple things. We filled it with his drawings, his favorite photos we had taken together, and dozens of colorful balloons that he would have laughed at. I stood at the front in a simple black dress, holding Lucas and Ethan's hands tightly. They looked so small and confused. I had tried to explain that their big brother had gone to take pictures in heaven. But how do you explain forever to a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old? And then they arrived. My parents walked in dressed in their best dark clothes. My mother's eyes were red and puffy, her makeup perfectly applied for the occasion. She hugged people she barely knew, accepting condolences with trembling lips and dramatic sighs. We did everything we could, she told one relative loud enough for me to hear. We prayed every day. I stood 10 feet away and felt nothing but a strange, detached calm. The same woman who couldn't drive 90 minutes to sit beside her grandson while he was alive was now performing perfect grief for an audience. My father stayed quiet as always, standing near the back wall with his hands clasped. Our eyes met once across the room. For a brief second, I saw something real in them. Regret, maybe. But he looked away quickly, retreating back into his lifelong habit of silence. Ryan and Brooke didn't come. Instead, they sent the largest, most expensive floral arrangement in the entire chapel. a massive wreath of white lilies with a shiny gold ribbon that read "Beloved Noah." It felt more like a statement than a goodbye. I had it moved to the back corner. I didn't want it near the photos of my son smiling. The service was beautiful in its simplicity. I spoke briefly about Noah's love for light and beauty, about how he taught me to see the world differently. I didn't mention the empty chairs or the unanswered calls. Some truths don't belong at funerals. Afterward, at the small reception, my mother approached me with open arms. "Olivia, this is just devastating. We're all here for you now." I looked at her for a long moment. "You weren't here when he needed you, Mom. Don't pretend you're here now." She blinked, surprised by my quiet directness. For once, she didn't have a rehearsed answer. She simply touched my arm and whispered, "We're family. Blood is thicker than water." I almost laughed. Blood had never felt thinner than it did in those months. That night, after the boys were finally asleep, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by silence. The kind of silence that presses down on your chest. I pulled out my phone and played one of the last voice notes I had recorded, with Noah's weak voice in the background. I cried until there were no tears left. But something important happened in the weeks after the funeral. I stopped performing for anyone. I stopped hoping my family would magically become who I needed them to be. Instead, I focused entirely on Lucas and Ethan. I held them closer. I read them extra stories. I started taking them on our light walks, teaching them to notice beauty just like Noah had taught me. Elena stayed in touch. She became more than a social worker. She became a true friend. She'd come over some evenings with dinner and sit on my porch while the boys played. Her presence was simple, consistent, and real. No drama, no conditions, just someone who showed up. Meanwhile, those voice notes I had recorded night after night began calling to me. At first, I just listened to them. Then I started transcribing them late at night after the boys went to bed. The words poured out, raw, honest, and full of love and pain. I wasn't writing a book yet. I was simply trying to survive. Little did I know that those quiet, private words would eventually become the bridge to a new life. A life my family would later try to claim as their own. The months after Noah's funeral were the hardest I had ever walked through. Grief isn't loud every day. Sometimes it's just a heavy quiet that follows you from room to room. I learned to function in that quiet, making breakfast for Lucas and Ethan, driving them to preschool, smiling when they told silly jokes, all while carrying an ache so deep it felt like part of my bones. But in that same quiet, something else was growing. I started waking up at 5 a.m., before the boys stirred. I'd sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my phone, listening to the old voice notes I had recorded in the hospital. Noah's voice, weak but full of love, mixed with my own exhausted whispers. At first I just cried. Then I began typing them out, slowly, honestly, one memory at a time. I wasn't trying to create anything for the world. I was simply trying to keep my son alive on paper. I wrote about our light walks. The way he laughed when fireflies landed on his hands. How he used to adjust my camera strap because, "Mom, you always wear it too loose." I wrote about the betrayal too. The unanswered calls, the garden club posts, the expensive wreath that showed up instead of his father. I wrote it all without filter, because the truth was the only thing that felt clean. That became my silent strategy. No announcements, no angry posts, no public fights. Just me, a notebook, and the quiet determination to turn my pain into something that mattered. I titled the growing manuscript Through the Lens of Goodbye. It wasn't for revenge. It was for survival, and for every parent who might one day feel as alone as I did. Elena was the only person who knew what I was doing. She read the first 30 pages one evening on my porch and cried quietly. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "Olivia, this isn't just your story. This is going to help people breathe again." Her words gave me courage to keep going. Meanwhile, my family stayed mostly silent. There were a few awkward texts after the funeral. "Let us know if you need anything," but the offers were vague and never followed through. I didn't respond much. I had nothing left to give them, and I was done pretending otherwise. As the seasons changed, I poured everything into the boys and the book. I took on more photography work during the day and wrote at night. The royalties from small jobs and the money I had saved by living extremely simply gave me just enough breathing room. I even started a small scholarship fund in Noah's name for other single parents with sick children. Nothing big, just enough to help one family with gas money or hospital meals each month. I did it quietly, no press, no recognition, just because I knew how much those small things would have meant to me. I was becoming a different woman, stronger, clearer, less willing to shrink myself so others could feel comfortable. I stopped explaining my boundaries. I stopped softening my truth. And most importantly, I stopped waiting for people who had already shown me who they were. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes of betrayal and grief, you know this part. It's not glamorous, it's lonely work, but it's also sacred. Every page I wrote felt like placing one brick in a new foundation, one that couldn't be shaken by anyone who only showed up when it was convenient. I had no idea how powerful that quiet work would become. The book was about to find its way into the world, and when it did, everything changed. It took me almost 9 months of quiet writing before I finally had something I could call a manuscript. Every night after Lucas and Ethan were asleep, I sat at that same kitchen table with my laptop and turned hundreds of voice notes into chapters. Some nights I cried so hard I couldn't see the screen. Other nights I smiled remembering Noah's silly jokes. I left nothing out, not the hospital nights, not the unanswered calls at 8:14, not the way my mother chose garden club over her grandson, and not the cold words from Ryan and Brooke. I called it through the lens of goodbye. I didn't tell anyone except Elena. I wasn't looking for validation. I just needed to get the story out of my body and onto the page. When it was finally finished, I sent it to a few small literary agents. Most didn't reply. One sent a polite rejection, saying the subject matter was too heavy for the current market. Another said it was beautifully written, but grief memoirs are difficult to sell right now. I almost gave up, but then Elena connected me with a small independent publisher in the Midwest who specialized in authentic stories. The editor, a woman named Margaret, who had lost her own daughter years earlier, read the entire manuscript in 2 days. She called me crying and said, "This book doesn't just tell pain, it shows how love survives it." They offered me a modest advance. I cried in my car after the call ended, not because of the money, but because someone had finally seen the truth I carried and decided the world deserved to hold it. The book came out quietly that spring, almost exactly 1 year after Noah passed. For the first few weeks, it did what most small press books do. Almost nothing. A few kind reviews. Some local bookstore placements. I kept working my photography jobs and raising the boys, thinking that was enough. Then one mother who had lost her child shared it in an online grief support group. The post exploded. Within days, women across the country were passing it from phone to phone, from message thread to message thread. They saw themselves in my words. The lonely hospital nights, the family that disappeared, the strength you find when you have no other choice. It hit the bestseller lists quietly at first, then louder. Suddenly, I was getting interview requests from podcasts, morning shows, and online magazines. People wanted to know how I kept going. How I rebuilt after losing my son and being abandoned by my own family. I never named my parents or Ryan publicly in the book. I changed enough details to protect the boys. But the truth was still there on page 187. The exact cold words Brooke had said on the phone. "This isn't a good time for us. You're on your own." That line went viral. People quoted it everywhere. It became a symbol for every person who had ever been told their crisis was inconvenient. Through it all, I stayed quiet about my family. I focused my interviews on hope, on boundaries, and on the new community I had found. Mothers who showed up for each other when blood family didn't. The success gave me something I hadn't had in years: breathing room. I moved us to a small but beautiful house with a big backyard and an oak tree that reminded me of our old one. I set up college funds for Lucas and Ethan. Most importantly, I expanded Noah's scholarship into a small foundation that helped single parents with children fighting cancer, covering gas, lodging, and meals. I named it Noah's Light Walks. Every donation felt like keeping his spirit alive. Elena became like family. She came for dinner every Sunday. Lucas started calling her Aunt Elena, and Ethan would crawl into her lap like she'd always belonged there. For the first time in years, my table felt warm. I thought my family had stayed silent because they were ashamed. I was wrong. They had been watching. And when the book became a success, they decided it was time to come back and claim their peace. The new house had a wide front porch with white rocking chairs and a big oak tree that shaded the entire yard. Lucas and Ethan loved it here. They planted flowers in Noah's memory and hung a small wooden swing from one of the lower branches. For the first time in years, our home felt peaceful. Mornings were filled with laughter again. Evenings were for reading books and taking new light walks around the neighborhood, cameras in hand, just like Noah taught us. The success of Through the Lens of Goodbye didn't make me rich, but it gave me freedom. I could say no to stressful photography gigs. I could be fully present for my boys. The foundation I started in Noah's name had already helped 12 families with hospital expenses. Every time I signed a check for a single mom sleeping in a hospital chair, I felt like Noah's light was still reaching someone. Elena was a constant presence in our lives. She helped me navigate the sudden attention from the book. She celebrated the small wins with me and reminded me to stay grounded when the interviews got overwhelming. One Sunday afternoon, while the boys played in the yard, she looked at me and said, "You did all of this in silence, Olivia. Never forget that." I hadn't forgotten. In fact, I was still living by the same silent strategy that had carried me through the hardest year of my life. No drama, no public call-outs, just steady, quiet forward movement. My family, however, had a different plan. The messages started small. A text from my mother saying she was so proud of my book and sharing screenshots of positive reviews. Then came likes and comments on my rare public posts. Ryan even emailed asking if we could talk about co-parenting now that things were more stable. Brooke sent a 5-star review on the book's page calling me incredibly brave and talented. The same woman who once told me I was on my own now wanted the world to see her support. I read every message carefully, then kept living my life. I didn't reply with anger. I didn't block them. I simply observed. Because by then I understood something important. People who only return when the lights are on and the cameras are rolling aren't coming back for you. They're coming back for what you've built. I focused on what mattered. Lucas started kindergarten and made his first best friend. Ethan began asking to hold the camera during our walks. I started a new photography project. Quiet portraits of mothers who had lost children, capturing their strength instead of just their grief. The work felt meaningful, healing. But I knew the knock was coming. I could feel it in the way the family group chat, silent for so long, suddenly became active again. I could sense it in the careful wording of their messages. They weren't reaching out because they missed us. They were reaching out because they saw value. On that warm Saturday afternoon in early June when the knock finally came, I wasn't surprised. I had been preparing for it in my own quiet way for months. I walked to the door knowing exactly who would be standing on the other side, and I knew exactly what I was going to say. This wasn't going to be a reunion. This was going to be a reckoning. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in early June. Golden sunlight filtered through the leaves of the big oak tree in our front yard. Lucas and Ethan were out back laughing as they took turns on the wooden swing. I was inside folding a basket of clean laundry when the knock came. 3 solid, confident knocks that echoed through the quiet house. I knew who it was before I even reached the door. I took a slow breath, the same kind I used to take in hospital hallways when I needed to stay calm for Noah. Then I opened it. There they stood on my porch like a perfectly staged family portrait. My mother Diane in her favorite pale blue cardigan, holding a large bouquet of expensive white lilies. My father Richard stood slightly behind her, hands in his pockets, looking at the floorboards. To their right were Ryan and Brooke, both dressed sharply as if they had rehearsed this moment. Brooke carried a gift bag with a shiny bow. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. I just stood there in my simple white t-shirt and jeans, barefoot on my own porch, looking at the 4 people who had disappeared when my son needed them most. My mother's eyes were already wet with those carefully practiced tears. She stepped forward with open arms. "Olivia, sweetheart, we've missed you so much. We've all been doing a lot of thinking. We want to make things right. We're still family." I didn't move. I didn't open my arms. I simply stepped out onto the porch and closed the door gently behind me so the boys wouldn't hear what was about to unfold. My mother continued, her voice soft and emotional. "After everything we've been through, after your beautiful book, we realize how much we've missed. Noah would want us all together again." The sound of my son's name coming from her mouth sent a quiet wave through me, but I stayed steady. Ryan cleared his throat. "Look, Olivia, the book is incredible. You've done really well for yourself. We're proud of you. Now that things are more stable, maybe we can talk about the boys spending more time with us. I'm their father, after all." Brooke nodded, smiling warmly. "And we'd love to help with the foundation too. It's such important work. We could even partner on some events, use our network to raise more money." I looked at each of them slowly. These were the same people who had chosen garden club meetings, business launches, and lake house weekends while my son fought for his life. The same people who had told me, "This isn't a good time," when I was begging for help. Now they stood on my porch with flowers and gift bags, talking about family and partnership like the past year had been a minor misunderstanding. If you've ever watched people rewrite history, the moment they see you succeed, you know how surreal it feels. My mother reached out and touched my arm. "Blood is blood, Olivia. We made mistakes, but we're here now. Let us be part of your life again. Let us help carry some of this success with you." Success. That word told me everything. They weren't here for me. They weren't here for Lucas or Ethan. They were here because they had seen the interviews, the bestseller lists, the foundation, and the new life I had built without them. I felt an incredible calm settle over me, the kind of calm that comes when you no longer need anything from the people standing in front of you. I looked my mother in the eyes and spoke quietly. "You chose not to show up when Noah was dying. You chose not to show up when I was sleeping in a hospital chair night after night. And now you want to show up when there's something to gain?" The air on the porch grew thick with tension. But I wasn't finished. I looked at each of them with the same steady calm I had learned in hospital rooms. I gave everything I had to Noah while he was still here, every hour, every dollar, every piece of my heart. I slept in chairs, sold my cameras, and begged you for help, and every single one of you chose convenience over him. You chose cruises, you chose business launches, you chose silence. My mother's face tightened. The performative tears dried quickly. "Olivia, that's not fair. We had our own lives. You can't hold that against us forever." "Fair," I said softly. "My son asked why his grandmother wouldn't come see him. He asked why his father was too busy. That was not fair, but I carried it. Alone." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Brooke's perfect smile faltered. "We never meant to hurt you," she said. "That phone call, it was a bad day for everyone." I met her eyes. Page 187. "Those were your exact words. The world has read them. And now you want to partner with me, to be family again because the book is successful." The porch fell silent except for the distant sound of my boys laughing in the backyard. That sound, their laughter, was the only thing that mattered. I continued, my voice quiet but clear. "I learned something important the night Noah left us. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when you have nothing left to give." Elena showed up. The mothers in the online groups showed up. You all showed up the moment it became easy and beneficial. My father finally looked up. His eyes were wet. For a second I thought he might say something real. "Olivia, I should have." His voice cracked. But before he could finish, my mother touched his arm and he went silent again. Old habits. I smiled gently, without anger. "There's nothing left here for you. I gave it all to my son. What I have now, this home, this peace, this life I built in silence, belongs to me and my boys, and to the people who chose us when it was hard." My mother's voice rose. "After everything I sacrificed for you." I raised my hand calmly. You chose your life. I chose mine, and I won't make mine yours. I turned, opened my front door, and stepped inside. No slam, no drama, just a quiet, final click of the latch. Through the door, I could hear them arguing in hushed, angry voices as they walked away. I didn't listen. I walked straight through the house and out the back door to where Lucas and Ethan were playing. "Mommy, push us higher," Ethan called, giggling on the swing. I smiled, a real smile, and joined them under the oak tree, the same kind of tree Noah and I used to sit beneath. As I pushed the swing and listened to their laughter, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of freedom. Elena came over that evening for our usual Sunday dinner. As we sat around the table with good food and even better conversation, I looked at the people who had truly become my family. Not by blood, but by choice. If you're watching this and you've been carrying the weight of a family that only shows up when it benefits them, I want you to hear me. You are allowed to close that door. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to build a new table with people who show up when it's hard. The ones who only knock when life gets good don't deserve a seat at it. I still take light walks with my boys. We still talk about Noah every single day. And every time I pick up my camera, I remember the promise I made to my oldest son, to keep finding beauty even after goodbye. That's the real ending of this story. Not the closed door on my porch, but the open hearts at my table. Thank you for sitting with me through all of this. If this story touched you, if you've ever had to choose yourselves and your children over toxic family, type boundaries in the comments. Let's remind each other that we're not alone. Your pain is valid, your peace is worth protecting, and your light, it keeps going.